The 24 elders represent the whole church from Pentecost to the present time. The 24 elders are not angels. The angels are around the throne and the elders in Revelation 5:11. Angels don't grow old. There are no elder angels. They do not sit, are not given crowns, are not called elders, are not redeemed, are not from every kindred, tongue, people, and nation, will not be made kings and priests, nor shall they reign on the earth. The 24 elders are not the saints raised when Jesus was resurrected in Matthew 27:52, because they are redeemed out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. The gospel had not yet been preached everywhere and had not been offered to the Gentiles till after Pentecost. The 24 elders are not leaders from the Old Testament and 12 apostles from the New Testament. The text doesn't express 12 plus 12. If they had consisted of the 12 apostles, John would have recognized or mentioned them. The 12 apostles will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel during the millennium, Matthew 19:28. The 24 elders are not 24 elders from the Old Testament. The 24 courses of priests served one after another, not all 24 at once. In 1 Chronicles 23:23, there were about 24,000 priests and assistants, plus gatekeepers and musicians. When a course was on duty, all its members were to appear in the temple. There are hundreds in the temple at any given time. Not all of them served on the same day. Find similar descriptions of heaven as shown in the book of Revelation, except for one thing. The Old Testament prophets did not see 24 elders. Why? The church is a mystery which was not clearly revealed in the Old Testament. Revelation 4:4. And round about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. Elders, Greek, presbyteros, term denotes position of authority in the synagogue or church. Sitting on 24 seats, the work of the church on earth is done. Clothed in white raiment, the Greek is hymenation, indicates they are overcomers, as seen in Revelation 3:5, where it says, He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment. This was to the church at Sardis. And they had on their heads crowns of gold. Crowns of gold. The Greek for crowns is Stephanos. It's a symbol of royalty, a badge of honor, given for overcoming and gaining a victory. Gold represents kingship. The same kinds of crowns are promised to the church. Their white raiment and crowns of gold show that the Bema Seat judgment of the church has already occurred before the scroll is even picked up. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. They are present in heaven on a sea of glass like unto fine crystal. They have not come out of a time of God's judgment, as seen later in Revelation 15:2. There you see a sea of glass mingled with fire. Revelation 4:10. The 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne, and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, etc. Revelation 5:5. And one of the elders said unto me. So we see that the elders make comments and explain things to John, also in chapter 7, verse 14 to 17. Revelation 5:8. You see 24 elders fall down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. The allusion is the temple service. Incense was offered by the priests at the time that prayer was being offered by the people. You can see this in Luke 1, verses 9 and 10. The elders, spoken of as priests in 5:10, are officiating in the temple above on behalf of the saints. They sing a new song about their personal relationship has redeemed us. They were redeemed out of every kindred, tongue, people, and nation on earth. The church is called out of the world. Their personal position has made us kings and priests. The church is promised the position of kings and priests. Their personal destiny. We shall reign on the earth. The church is promised to be joint heirs with Christ. So their new song is about their personal redemption, their personal position, and their personal destiny. Revelation 5, verses 9 to 10. I will let David Hawkins say more on this.
Revelation 5. And they sang a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book or the scroll, and to open its seals, for thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to God. Some of you have texts that say redeemed men. Redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and has made us, some of you have versions that read them, has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we, and some of you have versions that say they, we shall reign on the earth. Now back to Revelation 5, and let's take a look at the problem of this text. Is it us or them? Now here it is, folks, in a nutshell. Listen carefully. This is going to determine whether you walk out of here believing in the pre-tribulational rapture or whether you believe in a post-tribulational rapture. I'm going to quote one of the greatest scholars on the book of Revelation, who is also a post-tribulationist. He says in his book, George Eldon Ladd, Commentary on Revelation, that if in fact it is us, then that group is speaking about their own redemption and must refer to the church, which immediately makes us all pre-tribulational. Because whatever the 24 elders are, they represent a completed group of people. He happens to believe they are angels. I believe they cannot be angels, and it's stated so back in our message in chapter 4. But this is a little bit stronger than you can believe. I decided before I came tonight to go through all of the Bibles I have. Now I got 2 shelves of them in all kinds of translations. And I was amazed how often this particular footnote appears. Most ancient authorities agree that the word is them or they. Even in versions that are King James and support the us in the text, there's a little footnote. I have a King James. It has a footnote. Here's what it says. Most early manuscripts omit us in verse 9 and read them and they instead of us and we in verse 10. One of the leading pre-tribulational teachers in America says in his commentary that beyond a doubt all scholars know that the translation is them and they, not us. That we pre-tribulationists should not use this passage to teach our point, since it reveals our lack of scholarship. Oh, hey, there are worse statements than that. In various commentaries. Well, you know, I got kind of, you know, inquiring minds want to know. I decided to look into the matter. I have spoken publicly on this matter and have been asked also by some who are Greek manuscript men to keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to. See, the insinuation is, listen carefully, the insinuation is that the average layperson cannot really fathom this. I don't believe that at all. I believe the average layperson can fathom it and ought to know about it. First of all, out of all the manuscripts we have, the most important ones are, of course, in the original language, Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. Far more important than any other language into which the Greek is translated. Well, how many manuscripts out of some 5,000 on the New Testament do you think have the book of Revelation, any part of it, in the manuscript? Only 95. There's only 95 known Greek manuscripts on the book of Revelation in existence in the world. Now, some may be under the protective covering of some hill that archaeology hasn't uncovered yet, but we have only 95 known manuscripts in Greek on the book of Revelation. Now, I ask myself, since these are all fragments, how many of those have Revelation 5 in the fragment? Very interesting, only 24 out of the 95 have Revelation 5. Now, there's only 24 Greek manuscripts in the world that have Revelation 5 in it. I find it extremely interesting that 23 out of the 24 read us. There is, in fact, only one manuscript, Codex Alexandrinus, that says us. Now, you know, I mean, it says them. No. Yes, them. Hey, after that lion thing last week, I need your help, okay? Next project. When the Latin Vulgate was translated, 4th century A.D., Jerome, who translated the Latin Vulgate, became the standard Bible of the Catholic Church for 1,000 years, at least, and some still use it. The Latin Vulgate of Jerome had more Greek manuscripts available to him than we even know exist on this book. And I find it extremely interesting that in the Latin Vulgate it reads us in both verses, verse 9 and 10. First person plural. You say, well, that's interesting, but, you know. One guy came to me and he said, well, you know, the King James in 1611 didn't have all the evidence, and it wasn't until 1634 that they finally got all the manuscripts from Europe over to England, because King James pushed through to get the 1611 out just in glory to his own name, and really we ought to look at the 1634 edition, which had all the manuscripts. So, you know, when people do that, they kind of intimidate you. So I decided to go look up the 1634 edition. Kind of interesting. It reads us too. I looked up the versions. You know, versions mean Greek translated in another language, like Latin and Syriac and Armenian and Coptic and all that stuff. I decided to look up the versions, and I found out they all read us. Well, this is getting more interesting. As a matter of fact, in verse 10, where most of you who have New American Standard, New International, or footnotes on your King James, it says it should read them. In verse 10, the word them in the third person plural, they shall reign, are all what we call variant readings, even in the manuscript evidence. It means there's a lot of variation as to whether it's them or not. You say, I don't really care about this. Well, you better start caring. By the way, it would be possible to read us in verse 9, since only one manuscript ever changed it, and you could read them in verse 10 as an editorial comment of the redeemed ones in verse 9 and still have the same argument. Did everybody follow that? I didn't think so. Here's the point. In verse 9, it's very clear that only one Greek manuscript contains anything but us. Well, let's suppose for a moment, even though there are variant readings that have they and them and they shall reign, let's suppose that that's correct. Then verse 10 is simply an editorial comment on the us of verse 9. The problem here would still exist. If you say in verse 9, thou art worthy because you have redeemed us to God, then the 24 elders are singing a song about themselves that they in fact are redeemed. Angels cannot be redeemed. They are not angels. They have to be people who are redeemed. Is everybody listening? I believe Revelation 1 really settles it. Go back to Revelation 1. Verse 4 says, John to the 7 churches. Verse 5, from Jesus Christ, in the middle of verse, unto him that loved. Well, isn't that interesting? He didn't say unto him that loved them and washed them from their sins in his own blood. He didn't say he made them kings and priests unto God. And this is a direct quotation also in chapter 5, that he's made us kings and priests. No, the us belongs, and Revelation 1, 4-6 settles it, because there's no variation on that text whatsoever. You see, friends, what this means is the 24 elders in heaven, a completed body of people in heaven, are literally redeemed believers. The church of Jesus Christ is in heaven all during the tribulation. It is not on earth.